I spent the better part of my life studying men, not the ordinary sort, though they too have taught me much by their failures, but the extraordinary ones, the builders, the quiet men who moved nations with nothing but the conviction of their own minds. And across all those years, across all my conversations with Carnegie and Ford and Edison and the others, I noticed something peculiar. The men who earned the most spoke the least about earning. The men who possessed true power displayed it the least. And the men who commanded fortunes had long ago stopped performing for the approval of strangers. Meanwhile, the streets were full of a different kind of man, a man who talked of wealth he did not have, a man who dressed the part of success while his ledger screamed of failure, a man who polished the surface of his life while the foundation crumbled beneath him. I watched these men, too, for decades. And I came to understand something I now wish to tell you here in the quiet of this evening with no audience to impress and no reputation to defend. The hunger for applause and the hunger for accomplishment cannot live in the same chest. One will always devour the other. You must choose which one you feed. Now let me tell you what I observed in the life of Andrew Carnegie, because this was the man who first pressed upon my shoulders the task of studying the laws of success. When I met him, he was already the richest man in the world, or very nearly so. And yet I was struck by the modesty of his manner. He wore no jewels. He carried himself without the theater of wealth. He spoke in a calm, almost academic voice about the principles by which fortunes were built. And when I asked him why he did not carry himself like the king of industry he had become, he said something I have never forgotten. He told me that in the early years of his climb, he had watched many men who appeared wealthy. They dressed in fine suits. They dined at the finest establishments. They spoke loudly of their prospects. And every one of them, every single one, was a man in debt. They had borrowed the costume of success while the substance of it eluded them. Carnegie resolved as a young man that he would do the opposite. He would build the substance first, quietly, and let the appearance follow at its own pace. This is the first secret of the wealthy man that the poor man refuses to hear. But the most surprising part comes only now, because what Carnegie described was not a financial strategy. It was a psychological law. It was a law of the mind itself. And until you understand this law, no amount of effort, no amount of hustle, no amount of clever maneuvering will make you a man of means. The law is this: every human being carries within him a certain quantity of creative energy. Call it vitality, call it life force. I have called it, in my writings, the current that runs between your conscious desire and your subconscious mind. This current is finite. It cannot be spent in two directions at once. Every hour you spend performing the image of success is an hour stolen from the construction of it. Every thought you dedicate to what others will think of you is a thought stolen from what you might build. The showman and the builder cannot occupy the same body. I watched this principle play out in hundreds of lives. I watched men with real ability spend themselves into mediocrity because they could not resist the applause. They were seduced, and I use that word deliberately, seduced by the small, immediate rewards of being seen, of being admired, of being envied. And the great reward, the reward of actually becoming who they could have been, remained forever out of reach. Here begins the darkest game of the subconscious mind, and I want you to sit with this for a moment. When you perform the role of a successful man before you have earned the right to that role, something strange happens in the deepest chambers of your psychology. Your subconscious, and which cannot distinguish between what is real and what is merely repeated, begins to believe that you have already arrived. The hunger that would have driven you forward is quieted. The dissatisfaction that would have propelled you to greater effort is pacified by counterfeit praise. You have tricked your own mind into giving up before the journey was truly underway. This is why so many talented men die poor and resentful, not because the world was unfair to them. The world is often fair in its long accounting. They died poor because they spent their hunger on the performance rather than on the pursuit. They drank the ceremonial wine of success before they had harvested the grapes. Now, you may ask me, how do I know this of myself? How do I know whether I am a builder or a showman? It is not always easy to tell. The line can be subtle. A man may work hard and still be, at the core of his efforts, performing rather than producing. So let me give you a test, a quiet, private test that you may apply to your own life tonight when the lights are low and no one is watching. Ask yourself this: if no one would ever know what I accomplished, if my name would never be spoken, if my work would never be credited, if my success would remain forever invisible to every eye but my own, would I still do the work? Would I still build the thing? Would I still pursue the dream? If your answer is yes, then you are a builder, and the world will eventually come to know it whether you wish it or not. If your answer is no, or if you hesitate, then you have discovered something important about yourself. You have discovered that you were not pursuing wealth. You were pursuing recognition. And these are two entirely different hungers, though they are often confused for one another. The detail most people overlook is hidden right here in this very confusion. The hunger for recognition is a bottomless pit. It cannot be satisfied by any amount of accomplishment, because it is not really about what you do. It is about the eyes of others, and the eyes of others are fickle, inconstant, easily distracted. The moment you have their attention, they begin to look elsewhere. You must perform again and again and again, and the performance grows louder, more desperate, more theatrical, until you exhaust yourself. Meanwhile, the hunger for accomplishment, the true hunger of the builder, is a steady and patient fire. It burns at the same temperature whether anyone is watching or not. It warms you, it feeds you, it does not require fuel from outside. This is why the great achievers of history were so often described as serene, as unhurried, as working with a kind of quiet intensity that seemed, to the outside observer, to be almost effortless. They were not competing for the attention of their contemporaries. They were in conversation with something deeper, with what I have long called infinite intelligence, that great reservoir of knowing from which all true creation flows. When a man is in that conversation, he has no need to shout. Let me tell you about Thomas Edison, whom I knew personally and whom I considered to be one of the finest minds of his century. Edison worked very often in modest clothing. His laboratories were functional, not ornamental. He did not cultivate the appearance of genius. He cultivated the habits of genius. There is a difference. And that difference, that seemingly small difference, is what separated him from the thousands of other bright young men of his era who wished to be inventors but never became them. Edison had what I call a definite major purpose. He knew with absolute clarity what he was attempting to build. And this purpose, this singular burning clarity, organized his entire life around it. Everything that did not serve the purpose was cut away. He did not have time to perform the role of the great inventor because he was too busy becoming one. Do you see the distinction? Do you feel the weight of it? The man who performs success has no time left to build it. The man who builds success has no need to perform it. But here is where I must give you an uncomfortable truth, and I give it to you because I respect you enough to speak plainly. Much of what passes for ambition in our modern world is not ambition at all. It is exhibition. It is costume. It is the elaborate performance of a life rather than the actual living of one. And the performers are everywhere now, and more than they ever were in my own time, because the tools of performance have multiplied. In my day, a man might perform his imagined success at the dinner table or in the club. The audience was limited. The performance had a natural ceiling. But today, though I speak to you from a different age, I understand that the stages have multiplied beyond counting. A man may now perform his success to thousands of strangers from the comfort of his own living room, without ever producing a single thing of value. And because the applause is constant, because the small rewards of attention flow without interruption, the hunger that might have driven him toward real accomplishment is perpetually satisfied by crumbs. He is starving, but he does not know it, because his mouth is always full of something. What Hill said about this subject is deeply unsettling, and I say it now again. The subconscious mind is a garden. Whatever you plant in it will grow. If you plant the image of yourself as a man who is already wealthy, already successful, already arrived, and you plant it through the performance of that image, then your subconscious mind will settle into that belief. And once it settles, it stops striving. It has reached the destination, as far as it knows. The striving that would have carried you to actual wealth is quietly put away, like a tool no longer needed. This is the great tragedy of the performer. He is not lazy. He is not untalented. He has simply convinced his own deepest mind that the work is already done. So what then is the cure? The cure begins, as all true cures begin, with honesty. a brutal, private, unflinching honesty with yourself. You must sit down, perhaps alone, perhaps in a room like this one, with no audience, no phone, no mirror, and you must ask yourself what you have actually built, not what you have posted, not what you have claimed, not what others believe about you. What have you built? What can you point to and say, this exists because I made it exist? If the answer is small, do not despair. Every great work begins small, but do not lie to yourself about its size. Do not inflate it in your own mind to match the image you have been projecting to others. Let it be what it is, a seed, a beginning, a first stone. And then ask yourself the second question, which is harder. What am I willing to build if no one ever applauds? What will I do in the hours that no one is watching? What will I create in the silence? Because this is the space where fortunes are made, not in the public square, not on the stages, not in the places where applause is heard. Fortunes are made in the quiet, unwitnessed hours when a man labors at something he believes in for no reward except the becoming of it. Those hours accumulate, they compound. They build slowly and invisibly into a structure that one day becomes visible to the world. But by then, the builder is already past caring whether the world sees it or not. Here is a paradox I want you to hold carefully. The man who stops seeking approval becomes the man whose approval is most sought. The man who stops performing becomes the man whose presence is most commanding. The man who stops displaying his wealth becomes the man whom others recognize at a glance as truly wealthy. This is not an accident. It is a simple law of human perception. We recognize almost unconsciously the difference between a man who is at peace within himself and a man who is perpetually trying to convince us of something. We are drawn to the first. We are exhausted by the second. What the lives of great achievers have been trying to tell us for centuries is exactly this, that the way out of the performance is not a better performance. It is not a more clever costume, a more polished pitch, a more compelling display. It is the abandonment of the performance altogether. It is the turning inward toward the question of what you actually wish to build and the long, patient labor of building it. I want to speak now of what I have called the mastermind principle, because it applies here in a way that is not always obvious. The mastermind is the coming together of minds in harmonious cooperation toward a definite purpose. It is one of the great engines of human achievement, and it is very often confused, and especially in our modern age, with a kind of networking that is really just mutual performance. Two men, each performing his success for the other, each reinforcing the other's illusion, each walking away feeling validated, but none the wealthier. A true mastermind is not this. A true mastermind is a room in which the performers have taken off their costumes, in which each man has said, in effect, here is what I am actually trying to build. Here are the places where I am stuck. Here is the truth about my ambitions and my limitations. The other minds, gathered in that same honesty, contribute what they have, not to flatter, but to build. The output of such a gathering is acceleration, actual measurable progress toward each man's definite major purpose. You cannot enter such a room if you are still wearing the costume. You must hang it at the door. And this brings me to the question of auto-suggestion, which is one of the most misunderstood of all the principles I have written about. Many men have read my words about affirmations, about repeating to oneself the image of the man one wishes to become, and they have interpreted this as a license to perform. They have said to themselves, I am wealthy, I am successful, I am powerful. And then they have gone out into the world and performed those words for others. And they have been disappointed to find that the wealth did not come. The error is this. Autosuggestion is a private practice. It is the patient reshaping of the inner self through repeated believing thought. It is not a public performance. The moment you take the affirmation out of the silence of your own mind and turn it into a display for others, you have broken the spell. You have discharged the energy. You have spent the fuel on the applause. The real turning point begins here, in the understanding that your inner work must remain inner until it has done its full work. The seed must remain in the dark earth until the plant is ready to emerge. If you dig it up every morning to see if it has sprouted yet, you will only succeed in killing it. If you show it to every passerby, boasting of the garden you will soon have, you will only exhaust the small private force that was going to grow it. Let me give you a practice then for the coming weeks. A practice that may feel uncomfortable at first because it will require you to give up something you have grown accustomed to. For 1 month, just 1 month, do not announce your ambitions to anyone. Do not post them. Do not mention them at dinners. Do not use them to impress the people you meet. Keep them entirely to yourself. Let them burn in the private chamber of your own mind, where no air from the outside world can enter to cool them. Work on them in silence. Build toward them in silence, and observe what happens to the intensity of your pursuit. I suspect you will find, as thousands before you have found, that the fire grows hotter when it is not ventilated by public display, that the hunger sharpens, that the work accelerates, because all of the energy that was leaking out through the performance is now concentrated, focused, and directed toward the actual building of the thing. Let me now speak of something many men find difficult to hear. The performance of success is, very often, the symptom of a deeper wound. It is not mere vanity. It is not mere habit. It is, at its root, a cry for a kind of recognition that the man did not receive at some earlier point in his life. He learned somewhere along the way that he was valued for what he appeared to be rather than for what he was, and he has been performing ever since. I tell you this not to excuse the performance, but to help you see it clearly. Simply willing it away will not work. You must address the wound beneath it. The approval you seek cannot come from an audience. No audience is large enough. The only lasting regard comes from 2 sources: from yourself, earned through real accomplishment, and from the few who know you deeply enough to love who you actually are rather than who you perform to be. When a man arrives at this understanding, something in him settles. He stops needing the crowd. And it is precisely then that he becomes capable for the first time of building something real. The great men I studied, Carnegie, Edison, Ford, Rockefeller, Lincoln, Emerson, and the others, all shared this quality. They had, each in his own way, made peace with their own obscurity before they ever became famous. They had resolved to do the work whether the world noticed or not, and because of this resolution, the work became great, and the world noticed in spite of their indifference to its notice. Rockefeller was famously unostentatious. He dressed simply. He lived for much of his life in homes that were modest relative to his fortune. He gave away sums that would have built nations, but without the trumpets and parades that a performer would have required. His satisfaction was in the giving itself, in the building of institutions that would outlast him. Lincoln carried a sorrow that no performance could have touched. He was mocked, ridiculed, called ugly, called weak. And he bore all of it in silence because he had resolved, long before the presidency was his, that his work was not to please his contemporaries. His work was to preserve a union and to free a people. Everything else, every insult, every political setback, every personal loss, was endurable because it did not touch the core of what he was attempting to build. He did not need the applause of his era. He was building for history. You will not be Lincoln. I will not ask you to be. But you may take from his life this one principle and make it your own, that when your purpose is large enough and your commitment to it is deep enough, the opinions of the passing crowd become weightless. They cannot touch you. They cannot deflect you. You walk through them as a ship walks through fog, because your compass is set on something they cannot see. This is the inner compass of which I have often written. It is not found through the opinions of others. It is not calibrated by the applause of strangers. It is found in the silent consultation between your own deepest desire and that infinite intelligence from which all true purposes flow, and when it is set, it is unshakable. Now, some of you listening to me will say, "But Hill, I must market myself. I must put myself forward in the world. I must make my work known if I am to succeed." And you are correct to a point. I am not asking you to become a hermit. I am not asking you to refuse the honest promotion of real work. What I am asking you to do is to examine, with ruthless honesty, the ratio between what you are producing and what you are displaying. If that ratio is healthy, If the weight of your actual work is far greater than the weight of your performance of it, then you are a builder who also markets. That is a good thing. That is a sustainable thing. But if the ratio is inverted, if the performance exceeds the production, if the display exceeds the substance, if you spend more hours curating the appearance of your work than doing the work itself, then you have slipped into the condition of the showman. And no amount of clever marketing will compensate for this, because the world, in its long accounting, eventually sees. The costume falls off, the performance exhausts itself, and what is left is what was always there. Either a real builder whose work now stands on its own, or an empty stage. I want you to become the first. I want you to begin, tonight if you can, the quiet reorientation of your life away from performance and toward production, away from display and toward substance, away from the hunger for applause and toward the hunger for accomplishment. This will not be easy. The performance has its rewards, and those rewards are immediate. They come every time you post, every time you speak, every time you display. The rewards of production, by contrast, are slow. They accumulate invisibly. For long stretches, it will seem that nothing is happening at all. You will be tempted many times to return to the stage for a quick infusion of attention. Resist. Stay in the workshop. Stay with the building. The moment of emergence will come, but only if you remain faithful to the unseen hours. And when it comes, when the work you have built in silence finally steps into the light, you will discover something that no performer ever discovers. You will discover that you do not need the applause anymore. It will come and it will be pleasant, but it will not be necessary to you, because you will have built something that sustains you from the inside. You will have become a man of substance, and the substance itself will be your daily bread. This is the true meaning of wealth. It is not the number on the ledger, though the number may come. It is the state of being in which you no longer require the approval of others to know your own worth. It is the state in which you have made peace with the long, quiet labor of becoming who you are. The men who achieved this state were the men I studied. The men who did not achieve it, no matter how much noise they made, no matter how bright their costumes, no matter how large their audiences, these men died poor in the only way that ultimately matters. So I leave you with this. Take off the costume. Step down from the stage. Walk, alone if you must, into the quiet room where the work is done, and begin, in silence, in honesty, with patient and undivided intensity, to build the life that no performance can ever replace. When was the last time you did something meaningful that no one ever saw? That answer, if you will sit with it honestly, will tell you everything you need to know about the direction your life is now traveling, and everything you need to begin to change if the direction is not the one you wish. The road out of the performance is long, but it is the only road that leads anywhere worth arriving. I have walked it. The men I studied walked it. And now, if you are willing, it is your turn. The stage is empty. The workshop is waiting. Choose.